Right, so Middle-earth. It is, I reckon, one of the only made-up places you can properly wander around inside your own head, the way you might wander around a town you grew up in. You know where the corners are. You know roughly what is over the next hill, even if nobody has ever actually described that hill to you. And for a world that only exists on paper, that is a rather lovely thing. So that is what we are going to do tonight. Just wander. I have got 200 little facts about Tolkien's world lined up. And the nice part is there is no story to follow here. No big ending you have to stay awake for. Nothing you need to keep track of. If you drift off somewhere around fact number 40, you have not missed a thing. You can pick it up another night, or not at all, and it honestly will not matter. I will number them as we go, mostly so the two of us can keep a loose count, but please do not treat that as homework. Some of these are enormous world-shaping things. Others are daft little details I have carried around in my head for years, for no good reason whatsoever. I like both kinds about equally, if I am being honest with you. So get yourself comfortable, settle in, and let your eyes close whenever they feel like closing. There is no wrong way to listen to this. Right then, let us start somewhere quiet and green, because that is more or less where Tolkien himself started. Picture a round green door set into a grassy hillside. Not a cave, mind you, nothing damp or wormy about it. A proper little home with panelled walls, a good pantry, and a hall that runs back into the hill, with rooms coming off both sides. That is where we are beginning, because you cannot really talk about Middle-earth without talking about the small folk who lived in places like that. So, fact number 1. Hobbits are little. Most of them stand somewhere between 2 and 4 feet tall, which is why the big folk call them halflings. They tend not to love that name much, but it stuck. Number 2. There were actually 3 different sorts of hobbit way back, called the Harfoots, the Stuars, and the Falahides. The Harfoots were the smallest and the most common, browner-skinned, the classic hillside burrowing type. The Stuars were a bit broader, and were the only ones who did not mind boats and water, and the Falahides were fairer and taller, and a touch more adventurous. Over the years they all sort of blended together, but you can still see traces of each if you squint. Number 3, and this is the one everybody knows. Hobbits do not really wear shoes. The soles of their feet are leathery and tough, and the tops are covered in curly hair, usually the same colour as the hair on their heads. So no boots needed most of the time, which, when you think about it, saves an awful lot of faff. It also means a barefoot hobbit padding down a lane is almost completely silent, which turns out to be handy more than once for a certain burglar. Though I promise you no hobbit in the Shire is sitting around thinking about how good they would be at sneaking. They are thinking about lunch. Number 4. Their homeland, the Shire, was divided into 4 farthings, north, south, east and west, and later on a couple of bits got tacked on. Buckland over by the river, and the Westmarch out past the hills. Very tidy, very organised, in the way that people who never go anywhere tend to be about their own patch. Number 5 is the one that gets quoted at every mealtime. Hobbits love to eat, and they famously like to fit in a lot of meals. Breakfast, and then second breakfast, and then a little something called elevenses, and it carries on cheerfully from there through luncheon and tea and dinner and supper. I have always thought this is the most relatable thing in all of fantasy. No dragons required, just a strong opinion about when second breakfast should happen. Number 6. Now those cosy holes in the hillside are called smiles, but here is a detail people miss. By the time of the big stories, most hobbits did not actually live in holes at all. They lived in ordinary little houses. The proper dug-in smiles had become a thing for the very rich who could afford a grand one, and the very poor who lived in rougher ones. The middle sort just had a house like anyone else. Number 7. Bag End, the most famous hobbit hole of the lot, was dug out by Bilbo's father, a well-off hobbit named Bungo Baggins, for his wife. So it was a family home before it was a place famous adventures started from. Number 8. Hobbits count their years a bit differently from us. A young hobbit does not come of age until 33, which feels about right for such an unhurried people, and the years in your 20s before you are properly grown up are charmingly called your tweens. Being an irresponsible 29-year-old was apparently completely expected. Number 9. For a whole society, the Shire had almost no government to speak of. There was a mayor whose main jobs seemed to be presiding over dinners and running the post, and there were the sheriffs, who were less police and more, well, blokes who kept an eye on stray animals and wandering folk. That was about it. They mostly governed themselves out of habit and good manners. And number 10, the thing to understand about hobbits is that they were deeply, proudly unadventurous. They liked their comfort, they distrusted anything strange, and they thought anyone who went off having escapades was frankly a bit odd, which makes it all the funnier that the whole history of the world ends up leaning on them. But we will get there. There is a lovely image right at the start of Bilbo's story, a contract left out on the mantelpiece, spelling out the terms of a job he has not actually agreed to do yet. Very businesslike, very much not the sort of thing that leads to fighting dragons. And yet. So number 11, Bilbo gets hired essentially as a burglar. A company of 13 dwarves, led by one Thorin Oakenshield, plus the wizard Gandalf, turn up at his door and more or less decide he's coming along, whether he fancies it or not. Number 12. What they are after is the Lonely Mountain, a place called Erebor, which had been the dwarves' home and their treasure haul until a dragon named Smaug turned up, chased them all out, and settled in on top of the gold. The whole quest is about getting it back. Number 13. It is Gandalf who quietly makes the thing possible. He is the one who hands Thorin a map of the mountain and a key to a secret side door, both of which had come to him in a rather roundabout way. Without those two objects, there is no journey at all. Number 14. Along the way, deep under the misty mountains, Bilbo gets separated from the others and stumbles onto a plain little gold ring lying in the dark. And then he meets the creature it belonged to, Gollum, and the two of them play a game of riddles for Bilbo's life. I will not say much more about that ring yet, because it turns out to be a fairly big deal later, but that quiet moment in the dark is where it all starts. Number 15. Before any of that, there is the business with the trolls. 3 of them, called Tom, Bert and William, catch the company and argue about how best to cook them. And they argue for so long, mostly because Gandalf is cleverly keeping them at it, that the sun comes up. Trolls turn to stone in sunlight. So that was that. I have always liked that the first real danger in the whole legendarium is defeated by a couple of idiots not being able to agree on a recipe. Number 16. They stop at Rivendell, the Elf Haven, where Elrond looks at Thorin's map and spots something nobody else had. Moon letters, writing that only shows up under the right moon, on the right day. Handy, in a mysterious sort of way, and a bit inconvenient if you happen to need the message on a cloudy night. Number 17. One of my favourite characters turns up around chapter 7 of the book. Bjorn, a great gruff man who can change his shape into an enormous black bear. He keeps a house full of clever animals who serve his dinner. He cannot stand dwarves turning up uninvited, and he is exactly the sort of person you would want on your side in a fight and nowhere near you at breakfast. Number 18. Bilbo gets himself a little sword, an elvish blade really more of a long knife for him, and he names it Sting after using it against giant spiders. It has a rather useful trick, which is that it glows blue when orcs are near. Bit of an early warning system. We will run into that glow again. Number 19. The whole thing comes to a head in the Battle of Five Armies, which is one of those brilliant, messy climaxes where everyone who has a grudge turns up at the same mountain at the same time. Dwarves, elves and men on one side, goblins and wolves on the other, and then the great eagles and Bjorn come crashing in to tip the balance. And number 20. It does not end all sunshine. Thorin dies of his wounds, having made peace with Bilbo right at the end, which I find genuinely moving every time, and Bilbo goes home only to discover that everyone assumed he was dead, and his relatives are cheerfully auctioning off his furniture. There and back again, and then a legal headache. Very Hobbit. He does get most of his things back in the end, though a few silver spoons quietly go missing for good, and his standing in the neighbourhood never fully recovers. From then on, he is simply the odd Baggins who wandered off and came home rich and peculiar and far too fond of elves. He did not seem to mind that reputation one bit, which is rather the making of him. Here is a fun little contradiction to chew on. Elves are immortal, and yet elves can absolutely be killed. Both of those things are true at once, and getting your head around that is sort of the key to understanding them. So, number 21. The elves are called the firstborn, because they were the first of the children of the world's creator to wake up. They opened their eyes for the first time by a lake called Cuivienen under the stars, before there was even a sun or a moon. Imagine that. A whole people whose earliest memory is starlight and nothing else. Number 22. When we say immortal, what we mean is that they do not age and they do not get sick. Left alone, an elf simply carries on. But they can be slain in battle, and they can also, strangely, fade or die of grief. So their long lives are not a guarantee, just a very, very long default setting. Number 23. And even being killed is not quite the end for them. An elf who dies goes to a place called the Halls of Mandos, far in the west, where their spirit waits. Some are, in time, given new bodies and sent back, which is a comforting sort of afterlife, honestly, if you can put up with the waiting. Number 24. When the elves first travelled westward on a great journey, they split into three main groups: the Vanya, the Noldor, and the Teleri. Different temperaments, different fates. If elves ever seem like one uniform people to you, they really were not. Number 25. The Noldor are the ones to watch. They were the great craftsmen and scholars, the ones who made beautiful and dangerous things. And a lot of the deep, tragic history of the Elder Days is really the Noldor getting themselves into trouble. Brilliant, proud, and a bit doomed. We will meet their worst decision later on. Number 26. Galadriel, the Lady of the Golden Wood, is one of the oldest elves still knocking about by the time of the main story. She was there for the ancient dramas. She saw kingdoms rise and drown, and by the end she is essentially a living piece of history walking around in the present day. No wonder people find her a bit overwhelming. Number 27. Elrond, who runs Rivendell, is what is called half-elven, meaning he had both elvish and human ancestors, and he was actually given a choice about which kind to be. He chose to be counted among the elves. His brother, Elros, chose the other way and became mortal, and that choice matters enormously later, so tuck it away. Number 28. Legolas, the one everybody pictures with the bow, is a prince. His father rules the woodland realm, the forest kingdom, and Legolas is of the Sindarin sort of elf, the grey elves, so he is basically minor royalty on a walking holiday for most of the story. Number 29. Elves have senses that put ours to shame. They see further, hear better, and here is the odd one. They do not really need to sleep the way we do. They can rest by letting their minds wander in a kind of waking dream, walking along and half dreaming at the same time, which sounds either wonderful or exhausting. I have never decided which. It does mean an elf keeping watch through the night is never quite off duty and never quite fully present either, which might be part of why they can seem a little far away even when they are looking right at you. Half of them is somewhere else, remembering something that happened an age ago. And number 30, the great sad thread running through all the elvish stuff is that by the time of the famous stories, they are fading. Their time is ending, the world is passing to us, and one by one they take ship and sail west, away over the sea, and do not come back. There is a real melancholy to it. They know they are the past even while they are standing right in front of you, and they carry that knowledge with a grace I have always admired. No bitterness about it mostly. Just a long, quiet acceptance that their morning is over and ours is only beginning, and a gentle determination to leave the world a little kinder than they found it before they go. If you have to be a fading people, that is about the best way to go about it. Somewhere far underground, imagine the sound of hammers. Not frantic, just steady, ringing off stone in a way that carries for miles through the deep places. That, for me, is the sound of the dwarves, and they have one of the strangest and most touching origin stories in the whole thing. So number 31. The dwarves were not made by the world's creator at all, not to begin with. They were made by one of the great powers, a smith spirit named Ola, who got impatient waiting for the elves and men to show up, and made his own children out of stone because he wanted someone to teach his craft to. When he was found out, he offered to destroy them, ashamed, and the creator took pity and gave them real life instead. So the dwarves are, in a sense, adopted. I find that oddly lovely. Number 32. There were 7 fathers of the dwarves to begin with, and so 7 great houses. The eldest and grandest line is the line of Durin, and Durin himself is a name we will keep tripping over. Number 33. The greatest dwarf kingdom of them all was Khazad-dûm, which you might know better by its later, sadder name, Moria. In its glory, it was a city carved down through a whole mountain range, lamplit halls, and endless stairs, the sort of place that took centuries to build. Number 34. The reason Moria was so fabulously rich comes down to one thing they dug out of the rock there, a metal called mithril. I am not going to tell you just how valuable it is yet, because it deserves its own moment later, but their entire wealth flowed from it. And so, as it happens, did their downfall. Number 35. Dwarves have their own language called Khuzdul, and they guard it fiercely. They almost never teach it to outsiders. They keep their true names in it, secret their whole lives, and even their tombstones use a name in a different tongue. A properly private people. Number 36. Dwarf women are rare, far fewer of them than men, and here is the detail that launched 1,000 jokes. According to the law, they look so similar to the men, right down to the beards, that outsiders could not tell them apart, which is partly why other peoples spread the daft rumour that dwarves simply grew out of stone and had no women at all. Number 37. Dwarves are famously stubborn, and it turns out that is not just a personality trait, it is almost magical. When the rings of power get handed out later, the dwarves prove very hard to control with them. The rings could not turn them into puppets the way they did with men. All they could really do was make the dwarves greedier, which, to be fair, was not a huge stretch. Number 38. In the main story, there is exactly one dwarf in the famous company, Gimli, son of Glóin. And his great arc is not really about axes, it is about becoming genuine friends with an elf, Legolas, despite their peoples having spent an age being frosty with each other. It is one of the warmest things in the book. Number 39. Now that great city of Moria did not just get abandoned. The dwarves dug too greedily and too deep, as the saying goes, and woke something ancient and terrible sleeping in the roots of the mountain. They call it Durin's Bane. More on what exactly that was another time, but it is why the halls stand empty and dark. And number 40. The dwarves believe that Durin, their first and greatest king, comes back. Reborn again and again across the ages, the same soul in a new life, which is why you get a Durin the First and then much later a Durin the Sixth and so on. Most peoples in Middle-earth just have heirs. The dwarves reckon they get the actual bloke back. I quite admire the confidence of that. It also means a dwarf can, in a strange way, look forward to meeting their own greatest king in the flesh one day, rather than only reading about him in old carvings. For a people so devoted to stone and permanence and things lasting, having your founder keep returning must feel like the world quietly keeping a promise. it made a very long time ago. There is an image I love here, an island rising up out of the sea, lifted deliberately out of the water as a gift, not discovered, not settled, given. That is where the greatest kingdom of men began, and it is a proper tragedy from start to finish. So number 41. After the terrible wars of the elder days, certain families of men had fought on the right side, alongside the elves, against the first great enemy. As a reward, the powers of the world raised up a huge island in the Western Sea and gave it to them. That island was Numenor. Number 42. It was shaped a bit like a star, with a great mountain at its centre, and its very first king was Elros. Remember him? Elrond's brother, the one who chose to be mortal rather than an elf. So the entire royal line of Numenor traces back to a man who could have lived forever and decided not to. Number 43. The Numenorians were given a gift to go with their island, long life. Not immortality, but centuries. They lived far longer than ordinary men. They grew wise and tall and mighty, and for a long stretch it was genuinely a golden age. Number 44. There was, however, one rule. They were forbidden to sail west, past sight of their own shores, toward the undying lands where the powers and the elves lived. This was called the Ban, and the reasoning was gentle enough. That place was not for mortals, and going there would not give them what they wanted. But you can already feel where this is going. Number 45. Over the long years, that one small rule started to eat at them. They grew proud, and worse, they grew frightened of death. They'd been given so much life that losing it, in the end, felt like a cruelty rather than a fact of being mortal. And a people who are frightened of death will, unfortunately, do almost anything. Number 46. This is where the great enemy of the age, Sauron, gets his claws in. Long story short, he ends up on the island, at first as a prisoner, and then being extremely persuasive, he works his way into the ear of the last and proudest king and starts whispering. Number 47. And it works. The king, egged on by Sauron and terrified of dying, does the unthinkable and launches a great fleet to sail west and take the undying lands by force, as if you could conquer paradise. The response was final. The island of Numenor was drowned, swallowed by the sea, and most of its people with it. They call that the downfall. Number 48. Not everyone was lost though. A good man named Elendil, who had never gone along with the madness, escaped the drowning with his 2 sons, and 9 ships full of the faithful, carried east on the storm to the shores of Middle-earth. Number 49. And those survivors founded 2 new kingdoms in exile, Gondor in the south and Arna in the north. So the whole later history of men, all the kings and stewards and white cities, grows out of a handful of refugees from a sunken island. And number 50, the fun one to end on. If all this sounds a bit familiar, it should. Tolkien was openly playing with the legend of Atlantis, the proud island civilization swallowed by the sea for its arrogance. He even gave it an elvish name that means the same thing, Atalanta, the downfallen. He said the image of a great wave rolling over green land had haunted his dreams, his whole life, so he wrote it down and drowned a kingdom with it. There is something quietly wonderful about a lifelong recurring nightmare being turned patiently, over decades, into one of the great tragic myths of an entire made-up world. He took the thing that frightened him in his sleep, gave it a name and a history and a meaning, and in doing so, more or less tamed it. Not a bad way to deal with a bad dream, all told. Here is a lovely little thing to open on, one I think is genuinely charming once you notice it. The language of Rohan, the way their names and words are written down for us, is basically Old English. Tolkien was a professor of exactly that, and he could not help himself. So, number 51. The land itself is called Rohan by outsiders, but the people who live there call it the Mark, and they call themselves the Rohirrim, or the Eorlingers, meaning the sons of Yule. It is worth remembering that a lot of names in this world depend entirely on who is doing the naming. Number 52, they did not always live there. Long before the men of Gondor gave them a great empty green province as a thank you, after a chieftain named All the Young came riding to Gondor's rescue at a desperate battle. So Rohan exists because somebody once turned up in the nick of time, and the favour was never forgotten. Number 53. Back to that language thing, because it runs deep. The king in the main story is called Theoden, and Theoden is just the Old English word for king. A lot of their names work like that if you know where to look. It is Tolkien quietly showing his working, and I love him for it. Number 54. Their capital is Edoras, a hill town, and crowning it is the Golden Hall called Meduseld, with a roof that shines so you can see it from miles off across the plains. It is the sort of place built to be spotted by travellers and to make them feel they are nearly home. Number 55. The Rohirrim love horses above nearly everything else, which you probably guessed. But there is a special breed among them called the Mearas, the noblest horses in the world, said to understand the speech of men and to let no one ride them but the kings of the mark. Number 56. The finest of all the Mearas is Shadowfax, who ends up carrying Gandalf about. And he is not just fast, he genuinely seems to understand what is being said to him, needs no saddle or bridle, and only agreed to be ridden by Gandalf at all as a sort of personal favour. A better horse has never been written. I will fight anyone on that. Gently, obviously. There is a lovely understated bit where he simply turns up when Gandalf has need of him, unsummoned, having crossed a great stretch of country entirely on his own, just to be there. Try getting an ordinary horse to do that. Mine would not cross a car park without a bribe. Number 57. The royal family during the Great War is a proper little cluster of good characters. Old King Theoden, his nephew Éomer, and his niece Éowyn, who is one of my favourite people in the entire legendarium and does not get to do nearly enough for most of the book. Number 58. And then she does the thing, on the great battlefield, the most terrible of the enemy's captains, a wraith no living man can kill, looms over her, and she takes her helmet off and tells him she is no man and finishes him. With a bit of crucial help from a certain hobbit, it has to be said, but the moment is hers. Absolutely no notes. Number 59. People often say the Rohirrim are Tolkien's Anglo-Saxons, and that is mostly right. The culture, the poetry, the hall and the songs. But he added one big thing the real Anglo-Saxons never had, which is all the horses. So they are Anglo-Saxons as Tolkien wished they had been, thundering about on horseback instead of trudging. And number 60, their great fortress refuge, tucked back in a mountain valley, is Helm's Deep, with its stronghold the Hornburg. It is the place the people run to when everything else has failed, an old stubborn stone shelter that has never fallen while defended. There is something very comforting about a world having a designated last safe place. Picture a white tower catching the first light of morning, set against grey mountains, jutting out over a plain. That is the enduring image of Gondor, the great southern kingdom of men, and it spends most of its long history slowly getting old. So, number 61. The chief city is Minas Tirith, which means the Tower of Guard. It is built in 7 rising levels up against the mountainside, each with its own wall, so the whole thing climbs like a great stone wedding cake, with the king's court at the very top. Getting your shopping done must have been a nightmare. Number 62. It was not always called that. Originally, it was Minas Anor, the Tower of the Sun. It only got renamed the Tower of Guard after its sister city. Across the river, Minas Ithil, the Tower of the Moon, was captured by the enemy and became a place of horror called Minas Morgul. Sad how a pair of matching names ends up split like that. Number 63. For roughly 1,000 years, Gondor had no king at all. The royal line had failed, and rather than crown someone new, the realm was governed by stewards, caretakers, who ruled in the king's name and always insisted they were only keeping the throne warm until the true king returned. 1,000 years of keeping a seat empty out of loyalty. That is either deeply noble or slightly mad, and I think it is meant to be a bit of both. Number 64. The symbol of Gondor is the white tree, which stands in the courtyard at the top of the city. It is descended by a long and precious line of seedlings from one of the very oldest and most sacred trees in the whole world, brought over from the west by way of that drowned island we talked about. So Gondor's little tree is quite literally a living heirloom. Number 65. The last ruling steward in the story is Denethor, a proud, clever, increasingly frightened man who keeps a dangerous secret in his tower. He has one of the seeing stones, and staring into it has quietly broken him, though we will get to those stones properly later. Number 66. Before Minas Tirith, the real old capital was Osgiliath, which straddled the great river on both banks. By the time of the story, it is a haunted ruin, fought over back and forth, a shell of what it was. A lot of Gondor is like that, honestly. A present-day country living in the enormous shadow of its own past. Number 67. Here is a detail I have always found stirring in a quiet way. Along the mountains between Gondor and Rohan, there is a chain of beacon fires, great heaps of wood on the peaks, kept ready. When Gondor is in dire need, they light the first one, and the next peak sees it and lights theirs, and so the message races across the mountaintops faster than any rider, all the way to Rohan. A signal flare made of whole bonfires and human patience. Number 68. Denethor has two sons, and they are a study in contrasts. Boromir, the elder, bold and beloved and a bit reckless, and Faramir, the younger, gentler and more thoughtful, and rather overlooked by his own father, which is one of the quiet heartbreaks of the tale. Number 69. Remember those two kingdoms founded by the survivors of the drowned island? Gondor was the southern one, and it thrived. Its northern sister, Arnor, did not. It slowly dwindled and broke apart, and eventually fell entirely, so that by the main story it is little more than empty green country and forgotten ruins that a few rangers still quietly watch over. And number 70. The whole long ache of Gondor, the empty throne, the fading glory, gets its answer at the very end, when a certain ranger turns out to be the returning king and takes the crown as a lesser, joining the two old kingdoms back together at last. 1,000-year wait finally paid off, worth keeping a seat warm for, it turns out. Let us skip the throat clearing on this one and just start with the fact, because it is a good one. There were 5 wizards, not one, not a whole guild of them, 5, and most people can only ever name 2. So number 71, the wizards were not human, and they were not what you would picture from other fantasy either. They were spirits, angelic sorts of beings from the west, sent into the world in the shape of old men on purpose. The old man disguise was part of the point. Number 72. The 5 were Saruman, the chief of them, who wore white, Gandalf the grey, Radagast the brown, and 2 others usually called the blue wizards, whose names and colours vary a bit depending on which of Tolkien's notes you trust. So even the count of 5 comes with an asterisk, which is very on brand for this world. Number 73. Their whole mission was subtle, and this is the important bit. They were not sent to fight the enemy with raw power or to rule anyone. They were sent to counsel, to encourage, to stiffen the resolve of the free peoples and help them stand on their own. They were forbidden from just showing up and dominating everything, even for good reasons. Which is why Gandalf spends so much time nudging and hinting rather than throwing fireballs about. Number 74 Gandalf goes by a whole collection of names, depending on who is talking. The elves call him Mithrandir, the Grey Wanderer. Far in the west he was known as Alorin. The dwarves have their own name for him, Tarkun. Same old fellow, different labels, which by now is a running theme you have probably clocked. Number 75. Saruman was meant to be the greatest and wisest of the Order, the leader, the expert, and that is exactly what undoes him. He studies the enemy so closely, for so long, that he starts to admire the enemy's methods, and then to want that kind of power for himself. Pride, basically, the oldest trap going. Number 76. Radagast, the brown one, gets a bit of a bad rap from the others for caring more about animals and birds and green growing things than about the grand affairs of the wise. Personally, I think he had the right idea. If I were an immortal spirit sent to a beautiful world, I too might get distracted by the wildlife. The others treat it as a bit of a failing in him, this preference for hedgehogs over high politics. But I have always quietly suspected Radagast understood the whole mission better than any of them. Tending to small living things in a world under threat is not the least important job going. It might be very close to the entire point. Number 77. The two blue wizards went off east into the far parts of the world that the stories barely follow, and what became of them is genuinely uncertain. Tolkien changed his mind about it more than once. In some versions they failed and started their own cults. In others they did quiet, crucial good out there that nobody in the West ever heard about. I like that there is a corner of the map even the author left open. Number 78. Gandalf famously falls in the dark of Moria, fighting that ancient thing we mentioned, and by every normal measure, he dies and then he comes back, changed as Gandalf the White, sent back because his task was not finished. It is about as close as this world gets to a resurrection, and it is handled with a lovely lack of fuss. Number 79. Part of the deal for the wizards was that they had to keep their true nature hidden. They were not supposed to reveal how powerful they really were, or to overawe people with it. So Gandalf spends most of his time looking like a slightly irritable old man, with good fireworks, which is a marvellous disguise for what he actually is. And number 80, here is a quiet one to finish. Gandalf secretly carried one of the 3 great elven rings, the one tied to fire, meant not for power over others, but for kindling hope and warmth in cold hearts, which when you think about what he actually does across the whole story, is exactly the right ring for him to have. Here is a thing that tends to surprise people. The great Dark Lord of the whole saga started out essentially as a blacksmith's apprentice. He was a maker before he was a destroyer, and that never entirely goes away. So, number 81. Sauron was, originally, a spirit of the same order as the wizards, one of the lesser divine beings. And before he was anybody's enemy, he served under the great smith power we mentioned earlier, the one who made the dwarves. Sauron loved order and making and getting things exactly right. That instinct, pushed too far, is where the whole tyranny grows from. Number 82. He had a proper name once, Myron, which meant something like the Admirable. What we call him, Sauron, is not a name he chose. It is more of an insult that stuck, meaning the abhorred. The elves also called him Gorthor, a being with a nice original name, who ends up known to history only by the worst thing said about him. Number 83. For the whole of the Elder Days, Sauron was not the top villain at all. He was the right-hand man, the chief lieutenant of a far greater and more terrible enemy. He learned his trade in that service, cruelty and deception and the long game, and only became the big bad himself after his master was finally dealt with. Number 84. In the early ages he could still take a fair and beautiful form, and he used it. He walked into the elf realms, wearing a lovely face and a friendly name, presenting himself as a generous, wise visitor who only wanted to help them make wonderful things. And they let him in. That is the thing about him. For a long time, the danger was not a shadow on a mountain. It was a charming guest with excellent advice. Number 85. Under that friendly disguise, he taught the greatest elven craftsman the secrets of forging rings of power. Genuine teaching, genuine skill shared. He was, for a while, a brilliant tutor. The betrayal only lands because the gift was real first. Number 86. And then in secret, off on his own, in the fires of a mountain in his own land, he made one more ring to quietly rule all the others. We're going to spend a whole section on that ring next, so I will leave the details there. But that act, one hidden ring, forged in secret, is the hinge the entire world turns on. Number 87. It goes wrong for him eventually. At the end of a great war, a man cuts the ring from Sauron's hand, and Sauron is undone for a time. His body destroyed, reduced to a wandering spirit that has to spend centuries slowly, patiently pulling itself back together. He is remarkably hard to be rid of, which is rather the problem. Number 88. He lost something permanent along the way though. After the drowning of that great island, which he helped bring about, he could never again put on a fair and beautiful form. From then on, he could only appear as something terrible. The charming guest was gone for good. All that was left was the dread. Number 89. By the time of the main story, he is reduced to a great watchful presence, often pictured as an eye, because so much of himself is bound up in that one ring that without it he can never be whole or fully embodied. He is enormous and terrifying, and also, in a very real sense, incomplete, hunting for the missing piece of himself. And number 90, which sets up his ending. When the ring is finally destroyed, Sauron does not get a grand last battle. He simply collapses into a powerless shadow, spread thin on the wind, never able to take shape or trouble the world again. For all his ages of scheming, he goes out like a candle. There is a hard little lesson in that, about putting too much of yourself into one thing. Do not pour the whole of who you are into a single ring, or a single hope, or one object that somebody could take away from you. Keep some of yourself spread out, somewhere safe, somewhere quiet. For all his ages of cunning, Sauron never learned that, and it is the very thing that undid him in the end. Here is the image that gets everyone. A plain gold ring held near a fire, and slowly, as it warms, lines of fine elvish letters glowing up out of the metal like heat off a road. No jewel, no ornament, just a band of gold and a secret written in fire. Right, the rings. So, number 91. There were quite a few rings of power altogether. 3 were made for the elves, 7 for the lords of the dwarves, and 9 for kings among men. And then, over and above all of those, the one that Sauron made in secret to master the lot. 3, 7, 9, and 1. It is worth saying those numbers slowly, because the whole plot hangs off them. Number 92. The 3 elven rings are a special case, and I love this detail. They were made by the greatest of the elven smiths, entirely on his own, after Sauron's teaching, but with Sauron's hands nowhere near them. So they were never directly touched by his malice, which is exactly why they could still be used for good, quietly, all through the later ages. Number 93. That glowing inscription on the one ring is not written in Elvish, despite the Elvish letters. It is written in the harsh black speech of the enemy, just set down using the beautiful flowing elven script. A cruel message in a lovely handwriting. The letters spell out its whole purpose. One ring to find them all and bind them in the dark. Number 94. For a mortal who puts it on, the ring turns you invisible, but not in a clean or free way. It half drags you into a grey, shadowy version of the world, the same place those Wraith Kings exist in. So the longer you use it, the more you belong to that dim half-world, and the less to this one. Number 95. It also stretches your life out, unnaturally, but stretched is exactly the right word. because it does not enrich those extra years. It thins them, wears you down like too little butter over too much bread, to borrow the way Bilbo himself put it. That is why creatures who hold it too long, like poor Gollum, end up so hollowed out. Number 96. The 9 men who took the 9 rings did not get long, healthy lives out of it. They became the Nazgul, the ring wraiths, faded entirely out of the living world into that shadow place, kept going endlessly by the rings, utterly enslaved to the one that ruled them. The rings gave them power and took everything else. Number 97. The 7 dwarf rings mostly came to bad ends. Some were swallowed by dragonfire over the years, and others Sauron managed to claw back for himself. As we said before, the rings could not enslave the dwarves outright, so all that raw wealth and greed the rings stirred up ended up feeding disaster rather than obedience. Number 98. The one ring cannot just be melted down or thrown away or dropped in the deepest sea. Tempting as all of those sound, it can only be unmade in the one place it was forged, in the fire of that mountain in the enemy's own land, which is a maddening design flaw until you realise it is also the entire reason there is a story at all. Number 99. And the ring is not a passive object. It has a will of its own, a sort of slow, patient cunning. It wants to get back to its master. It slips off fingers, it makes itself heavy or light. It whispers to whoever carries it. It betrayed Gollum. It would have betrayed Bilbo. It works on Frodo the whole way. The villain of the story is, in a real sense, a piece of jewellery. And number 100, which is a nice place to pause, since we are halfway. When the one ring is finally destroyed, the 3 elven rings lose their power too, all of them fading together. Everything the elves had preserved and held back from time with those rings begins, gently, to slip away. Winning the war means the elves lose their world. The bittersweet is baked right in. Here is the picture I always come back to. 9 figures walking out of a hidden green valley at dusk, small against the hills, setting off south, with no fanfare at all. No army seeing them off, no trumpets. Just 9 of them, and a very long way to go. That quietness is the whole point. So number 101. There were 9 of them, and that number was chosen on purpose, to stand against the 9 ring wraiths on the other side. 9 walkers set against 9 riders. A little bit of hope, built to exactly match the shape of the fear. Number 102. At the centre of it is Frodo Baggins, Bilbo's younger cousin and heir, who ends up carrying the ring, not because he's the strongest or the wisest, but because he's willing to, when nobody else really wants the job. There is something very true about that. The task lands on the one who does not flinch from it. Number 103. Then there is Samwise Gamgee, Frodo's gardener, who was not even supposed to come along and gets roped in after being caught eavesdropping. And I will say, it plainly, Sam is the actual hero of the whole thing. The quest runs on his stubborn loyalty far more than on anyone's sword. Tolkien said as much himself. Number 104. 2 more hobbits round out the little contingent. Frodo's cousins Merry and Pippin, or to give them their full grand names, Meriadoc and Peregrine. They start off as comic relief, 2 lads mostly along for the adventure and the snacks, and they grow up over the course of the story in a way that sneaks up on you. Number 105. For the men, there is Aragorn, who first turns up as a weather-beaten ranger called Strider that nobody quite trusts. He is, it turns out, the hidden heir to those old lost kingdoms, the returning king in rough travelling clothes, keeping his head down until the moment is right. Number 106. And there is Boromir, the bold son of Gondor's steward, and his is the tragic thread of the group. The ring gets into his head, plays on his love for his people, and he tries to take it from Frodo. He is not a villain for it, though. He repents and dies defending the younger hobbits, and it is genuinely one of the more moving deaths in the book precisely because he was not a bad man, just a good one who reached too far. Number 107. Rounding it out are Legolas and Gimli, the elf and the dwarf, whose two peoples had spent an age barely speaking to each other. Over the course of the journey they go from prickly rivals keeping score to close friends who genuinely cannot bear to be parted. If you want the emotional heart of the Fellowship in miniature, it is those two. Number 108. And of course Gandalf the Ninth, the guide holding the whole ramshackle group together, which is exactly why it is such a gut punch when he falls in Moria partway through, and the rest of them have to carry on leaderless, suddenly a good deal more alone than they were. Number 109. The Fellowship does not actually last very long as a group of 9, which surprises people who only know the films. They break apart at a place called Amon, split up by grief and the rings meddling, and from there the story forks into separate threads that run in parallel for ages. The togetherness is precious partly because it is so brief. And number 110. The whole thing was formed at the Council of Elrond in Rivendell, where representatives of all the free peoples gathered to argue about what on earth to do with the ring, and the answer they landed on, to walk it into the heart of enemy country and throw it in a volcano, is so obviously mad that it just might work. It is the least sensible plan in the room, chosen precisely because the enemy would never expect anyone to be that foolish. Here is one of the strangest and loveliest ideas in the whole world. There are trees that walk and talk and herd other trees like a shepherd herds sheep. Once you have met them, you cannot imagine Middle-earth without them. So, number 111. The Ents are tree herders, great slow beings shaped like walking trees, and they were made for a reason. When the world was young, one of the great growing powers worried her forests would have no one to defend them against axe and fire. So the Ents were given life to guard the trees, someone to stand up for the woods. Number 112. The eldest of them, Treebeard, is spoken of as one of the very oldest living things in the whole of Middle-earth. Not one of the oldest Ents, one of the oldest anythings. He has been standing in his forest since before most of the history we have talked about even happened, watching ages come and go at his own unhurried pace. Number 113. There is a quiet grief woven into the Ents, and it is the loss of the Entwives. Long ago, the Ents and the Entwives drifted apart, the Ents loving the wild woods and the Entwives loving ordered gardens and growing things. And eventually, the Entwives' lands were laid waste, and they were simply gone. So the Ents are, in a sense, the last of their kind, wandering an old forest, still half hoping to find their wives again. It is such a sad, gentle thing to have put in a book about a magic ring. Number 114. Entish, their own language, is famously slow. It is a deep, booming, unhurried tongue, and the Ents have a saying that nothing is worth saying in it unless it is worth taking a very long time to say. They will not even use a name for something unless the name has properly grown to describe its whole history. Imagine how long it takes them to say good morning. Number 115. Not every walking tree is so genial, mind you. There are also the Hjorns, which are something halfway between an Ent and an ordinary tree. Darker, wilder, more dangerous, able to move about but far less friendly and reasonable than the Ents. When a forest starts moving toward you in the dark, those are the ones you're dealing with. Number 116. Switching from the very slow to the very fast. The great eagles of Middle-earth are not just big birds. They are proud, intelligent creatures, servants of the Lord of the Airs, one of the great powers of the West, and they turn up at crucial moments across the whole span of history, like a recurring miracle with feathers. Number 117. The chief of them in the later ages is Gwaihir, the Windlord, and he has a habit of showing up to rescue Gandalf at exactly the right moment, more than once. There is a running joke among fans about why they did not just fly the ring to the volcano, and there are good in-world reasons why not. But the eagles are best enjoyed as what they are, a sudden rush of rescue out of a hopeless sky. Number 118, and they do it again and again through history. They pluck heroes off cliff faces in the elder days. They come crashing into that great battle at the end of Bilbo's story to turn the tide. They carry the exhausted off the ash at the very end. Whenever things are at their most lost, more often than not, it is wings. Number 119. Down among the growing things, the golden woods of Lothlorien are full of malon trees, tall silver-barked things whose leaves turn gold in autumn and do not fall until spring, when the new gold leaves push them off. So the wood is never bare. And there is a lovely footnote. A single malon later grows in the Shire, the only one ever to grow west of the mountains, from a gift given to Sam. A little piece of elvish wonder, taking root in an ordinary hobbit garden. And number 120, just to keep us honest, trees are not all kindly. Down in the old forest near the Shire, there is Old Man Willow, an ancient, malicious, half-awake tree that nearly does for the hobbits early on, lulling them to sleep and trying to swallow them whole. So for every gentle tree beard there is something in the woods that would happily have you for lunch. The forests of Middle-earth have opinions, and not all of them like you. It is one of the things I find most convincing about the place. The nature in these books is not just scenery for the heroes to stride through. It is awake and ancient, here long before any king or wizard, and still here long after they are dust. You are a guest in the woods, and the woods know it, straight in with a fact that always throws people. The very first dragon could not fly, no wings at all. The winged sort we all picture came much, much later. Dragons in this world have a whole evolution, and it starts on the ground. So, number 121. Dragons were bred deliberately by the great enemy of the elder days as weapons. They were not a natural species that wandered in. Someone made them on purpose to burn things, which tells you rather a lot about the sort of mind that was running the show back then. Number 122. The first of them was Glaurung, called the father of dragons. No wings, but plenty of fire and cunning, and a slow, heavy, serpentine menace. He is tied up in one of the most tragic stories in the whole legendarium, which we will brush against shortly. A grim beast in a grim tale. Number 123. The greatest of the winged dragons, when they finally came, was Ancalagan the Black, and he was so vast that the accounts say, when he was finally brought down, his fall broke the peaks of mountains beneath him. That is the scale we are talking about, with the truly ancient ones, not a big lizard, a living catastrophe with wings. Number 124. By the time of the more familiar stories, the great dragons are nearly gone, and Smaug, the one who took the dwarf kingdom under the mountain, is spoken of as the last really mighty one left. An ending of an age in a way, the last of the great worms, sitting on a hoard, growing old and vain. Number 125. Here is a neat connection back to the rings. Dragonfire was hot enough to destroy some of the lesser rings of power, which is part of what became of a few of those dwarf rings. But it was nowhere near enough to unmake the One Ring. Only the fire it was forged in could do that. So even the breath of dragons falls short of the volcano. Number 126. Dragons have a genuinely unsettling power in their voices and their gaze, a sort of hypnotic spell. Talking to one is dangerous, even if it never touches you, because it can bind your will, muddle your thoughts, make you doubt your friends and blurt out things you meant to keep secret. Bilbo has to be terribly careful in his famous chats with Smaug, flattering and riddling and never quite telling the truth. Number 127. And yet even Smaug has a weak spot, quite literally. His underside is armoured with gemstones and gold stuck fast from lying on his hoard, all but one small bare patch. A little thrush, a bird, overhears this and carries the secret to a grim archer named Bard, and that one bare patch is the whole difference between a burning town and a dead dragon. An entire monster, undone by one gap and one nosy bird. Number 128. Dragons are not the only great beasts about. Down in the hot southern lands, there are the Oliphants, which the fancy name for is Mumakil, enormous war elephants far larger than any elephant we would know, marched into battle with towers on their backs. There is a lovely little hobbit rhyme about them, half disbelieving, the sort of thing a child recites about a creature they are sure must be made up. Number 129. Then there are the wargs, which are not just big wolves. They're intelligent evil wolves with a language of their own and a nasty habit of teaming up with orcs, carrying them into raids, hunting together. A wolf you could reason with. In other words, if reasoning with something that wants to eat you were ever a good idea. And number 130, one to clear up because people muddle it. The winged mounts the ring wraiths ride in the later parts of the story are not dragons. They are described as fell beasts, older, featherless, leathery flying things, nightmarish and half-rotten, related to nothing pleasant. So if you ever pictured the wraiths riding dragons, that is a very forgivable mistake, but they are riding something arguably worse. The films made those mounts look a fair bit like dragons, which is understandable for a frightening thing in the sky. But the books are careful to keep the true dragons rare and set apart, creatures of the deep past. By the time of the main story, a real dragon would be almost a relic, a wonder as much as a terror. What the wraiths ride is just a horror, with none of the grandeur. Here is the image at the heart of the whole ancient history. 3 jewels, made by hand, holding inside them a captured light so pure that once it was gone from the world, it could never be made again. Everything in the deep lore, all the wars and oaths and heartbreaks, comes back to those 3 stones. So number 131. The jewels are the Silmarils, made by the greatest and proudest of all, the elven craftsmen, and what they held was the light of 2 great trees that lit the world in the days before there was a sun. We will meet those trees properly in a moment, but hold on to this, the Silmarils were the only place that light survived. Number 132. And then the great enemy stole them. He destroyed the 2 trees, plunging the world into darkness, and carried the 3 jewels off to his fortress, setting them in an iron crown on his own head. In response, their maker swore a terrible binding oath to get them back at any cost, and dragged his sons and his whole people into it. That oath poisons everything that follows. Number 133. To chase the stolen jewels, a huge host of those proud elves we mentioned earlier rebelled and left the blessed lands in the west, and came back over the sea to Middle-earth to make war. It was meant to be a glorious crusade. It became, over long centuries, a slow catastrophe, with the oath forcing good people into worse and worse deeds. Number 134. Out of all that darkness comes the single most beautiful story in the whole legendarium, the tale of Beren and Luthien. A mortal man and an elf maiden fall in love, and to win the right to marry her, he is set the impossible task of stealing a Silmaril back from the enemy's crown, and against every expectation, together they actually do it. Cut one of the 3 jewels right out of the iron crown of the Dark Lord himself. Number 135. And here is the part that stops me every time. Luthien, an immortal elf, chooses to give up her deathless life to stay with Beren and share his mortal fate. She trades forever for a life with him that will end. There is a real-world echo behind that, tied to Tolkien and his own wife, but I will save the details of that for right at the end, because it deserves the last word rather than a passing mention here. Number 136. Not every tale from these days is a love story. The saga of Turin Turambar is about as bleak as Tolkien ever got. A good man hounded by a curse laid on his family, by that same enemy, making one doomed choice after another with the best of intentions, and it all goes horribly, tragically wrong. If you ever want proof that this world is not all cosy hobbits, that is the one to read. Real proper tragedy. Number 137. There was a hidden elven city in those days called Gondolin, secret and shining, tucked away in a ring of mountains, where the enemy could not find it. And it stood safe for a long, long time, right up until it was betrayed from within. And its fall is one of the great sorrowful set pieces of the elder days. Even the best hidden good things, it turns out, tend to be given away by someone on the inside. Number 138. One of the three Silmarils ends up bound to the brow of a mariner named Eärendil, who sails his ship right up into the sky to beg the powers of the West to come and help against the enemy at last. And he keeps sailing forever, the jewel on his forehead becoming a bright star that everyone in Middle-earth can see. That star is, in the world of the story, the planet we call Venus. So the brightest star in their evening sky is a man carrying a jewel, asking for help on everyone's behalf. Number 139. The help does come in the end, and the great enemy is defeated in a war so vast it reshaped the land, and he is thrust out of the world entirely, into the outer void, done at last. That war closed the first age of the world. The price of it, though, was enormous, and much of the beauty of the elder days was broken and drowned in the winning. And number 140. As for the three jewels themselves, they scatter and are lost forever. One is carried up into the sky as that star, one ends up cast into the depths of the sea, and one is thrown into a fiery pit in the earth. Sky, sea and stone, one apiece, and none of them ever recovered. All that striving, all those oaths and deaths, and the jewels simply pass out of everyone's reach. There is a quiet moral in that, if you want one. Let us start before the beginning, with a sound in the dark. Before there was any world at all, there was music, a great song sung in the void, and everything that exists was dreamed up in that singing first. It is where all the powers we keep mentioning actually come from. So, number 141. At the very top of everything is the one called Ilúvatar, the single creator behind it all. He is not a character who wanders the story. He is the source, the mind behind everything, sitting quietly in the background of every other tale. Number 142. Before the world was made, he brought into being a host of great spirits, and together they sang. Out of that music, that shared song, the whole world was first imagined into shape, every mountain and sea sketched out as a theme before it was ever made solid. Creation by choir, essentially. I have always found that a lovely idea to fall asleep on. Number 143. There was, of course, discord in the music. The mightiest of those spirits, Melkor, wanted to sing his own tune, rather than the one given, and wove strife and disharmony into the song. And a great deal of what is broken and cruel in the world traces right back to that first act of wanting to be the composer instead of a singer. Number 144. The greatest of those spirits then entered into the world itself to shape it and tend it, and once inside the world, they are called the Vala. They are the nearest thing this mythology has to gods, though they are really more like powers or guardians, each one tied to some part of the world: the seas, the sky, the growing things, the dead. Number 145. Chief among the good ones is Manwe, lord of the airs and the winds, closest of all to the mind of the Creator, and his queen is Vada, whom the elves love best of all, and call Elbereth. She is the one who set the stars in the sky. When an elf is frightened in the dark, it is her name they call out, the Star Kindler. Rather a comforting thing to have watching over you. Number 146. There are others, each with their domain. Aula the smith, whom we have met, who could not wait and made the dwarves. Yavanna, who loves all growing things and set the Entis to guard the forests. Ulmo, lord of all waters, who never really abandons Middle-earth even when the others withdraw, moving through every river and rain. If you have ever felt watched over by the sea, that is very much Ulmo's thing. Number 147. And there is Mandos, the keeper of the dead, whose great halls in the west are where the spirits of slain elves go to wait, as we talked about a while back. He is stern and speaks rarely, but when he does say something, it tends to come true. Not a cheerful house guest, but an important one. Number 148. Below the Valar are the lesser spirits, of the same kind, called the Maya, and here is where it all connects up. The wizards were Maya, Sauron was a Maya, so were the Balrogs, those creatures of shadow and flame, one of which slept under Moria. They are the same order of spirit, poured into smaller vessels, some for good and some for ill. Number 149. One of the loveliest of the Maya was Melian, who came down into Middle-earth, fell in love with an elven king, and married him, which almost never happened between the two kinds. She wove a great unseen girdle of protection around their forest kingdom, so that no evil could enter it uninvited, and it held for centuries. Love and a magical fence. Honestly, relationship goals. And number 150, back to those two trees we keep promising. Before there was a sun or a moon, Valinor was lit by two great trees in the west, one silver and one gold, called Telperion and Laurelin. They gave light in gentle waxing and waning turns, so there was a kind of day and evening without any sun at all. And it was their light, remember, captured in those three jewels, that the whole First Age was fought over. When the enemy killed the trees, that soft two-toned light lingered on in the Silmarils and in the sun and the sun and moon we know were made afterward as a sort of replacement. Which means, in this world, our sunlight is the second best lighting. The really good stuff is long gone. Here is the detail that explains the entire rest of the man's life, really. Tolkien did not invent the languages to decorate his world. He invented the world to give the languages somewhere to live. The words came first. Everything else grew up around them like moss on a stone. So, number 151. He said as much himself, more or less. He had been making up languages for fun since he was a boy, and at some point he realised a language needs a people to speak it, and a people needs a history, and a history needs a world. So the whole enormous legendarium is, at bottom, an elaborate home he built, for some words he liked. I think that is completely wonderful, and also a little bit mad, which describes a lot of the best things. Number 152. The grandest of the Elvish languages is Quenya, the high, formal, ancient tongue, the sort of Latin of the elves, and its sound was shaped heavily by Finnish, which Tolkien fell in love with as a young man. So if Quenya sounds strangely northern and flowing to you, that is why. It has Finnish in its bones. Number 153. The everyday Elvish you actually hear most in the stories is Sundarin, the grey elven tongue, and that one he built to sound like Welsh, another language he adored. Place names. The way words soften and shift, all of it has that Welsh music to it. Gandalf's Elvish name, the Grey Wanderer one, is Sindarin. So the two big elf languages are basically Finnish and Welsh in fancy dress. Number 154. He gave them writing systems too, proper ones. There are the Tengwa, the flowing, elegant letters you see on the ring and on the doors of Moria, and there are the Surth, the angular runes better suited to being scratched into wood and stone, which the dwarves especially took to. He did not just decide the languages sounded nice, he worked out how they would look written down by different hands. Number 155. Not every tongue is beautiful. The dwarves have their guarded Kuzdal, which we met, and then there is the black speech, the harsh, ugly language the enemy devised for his own servants, all hard consonants and menace. Tolkien, a man with strong opinions about the sound of words, made the villain's language deliberately unpleasant to say. You are supposed to dislike it in your mouth. Number 156, which brings us neatly back to that ring inscription. The words glowing on the ring are in that ugly black speech, but written using the beautiful Elvish Tengwa letters. We touched on this before, so I will not go on about it, but it is a small perfect example of the whole man's craft, two invented systems layered on top of each other to make one chilling little sentence. Number 157. Beyond the big ones, he sketched out loads more to different depths. Entish, the slow tree language, a tongue for the powers of the West, fragments and grammars for peoples who barely appear, some of them just a handful of words in his private notes. The iceberg of languages under this world goes down a very long way, and most of it never surfaces in the books at all. Number 158. Here is a clever bit of the trick, the common speech that everyone in the story actually talks. The ordinary shared language is called Westron, and the conceit is that the entire book is a translation of it into English. So the plainness of the hobbits and the loftiness of the elves is meant to reflect how they sounded in Westron. The whole book pretends to be a translated document, a lovely bit of scholarly playfulness from a man who translated old texts for a living. Number 159. That translation trick goes deeper than you would think, because Westron was related to the language of Rohan the way English is related to older northern tongues. Tolkien rendered the speech of Rohan as Old English to preserve that relationship, and the hobbits' names got the same treatment. So when we said Rohan sounds Anglo-Saxon earlier, that was a deliberate translation choice, mirroring a real relationship between the invented languages. The bloke thought about this far more than any sane person would. And number 160, a couple of word facts to close on, because he was a word man to his core. He coined a lovely term, eucatastrophe, for the sudden joyous turn at the end of a story when all seems lost and then, against hope, it comes right. The eagles arriving, essentially. And he once mused that the most beautiful sounding phrase in the English language, judged purely on sound and ignoring the meaning, might be Celador. Say it slowly to yourself. Celador. He may have had a point. It is a very soothing thing to drift off repeating at any rate. Straight in, no preamble. Middle-earth is not another planet. It is meant to be our own world, this one, in an imagined distant past that we have simply forgotten. That reframes everything, so let us sit with it for a minute. So, number 161. The proper name for the world is Arda, and it is our Earth, long ago, in a mythic age before recorded history. Tolkien was quite explicit that he was writing an invented mythology for England, a lost prehistory. So all of this is supposed to have happened here, before the seas were in their current shapes, and the memory of it faded into fairy tale, which is a genuinely lovely thing to believe, for the length of a nap. Number 162. The famous map, the one on the inside cover of every copy, only shows the northwestern corner of the whole world. It is like having a detailed map of one county and nothing beyond it. Almost everything east and south is unmapped. A great blank space full of peoples we only have a glimpse. Number 163. Off the edges there are whole regions with names and little else. Away to the south lies Harad, a hot land whose people, the Haradrim, march with those war elephants we mentioned. Away to the east lies Rune, home to the peoples the Westerners lump together as Easterlings. They are the enemy's allies in most of the tales, but that is very much the Western point of view. Whole civilizations reduced to a direction and a rumour. Number 164. Far out west, across a wide stretch of sea, lie the blessed lands where the powers and many of the elves dwell, cut off from Middle-earth by the great water. That is where the elves are sailing to when they leave, and where that forbidden island once sat between the two. The west is not a place you can just row to. It is somewhere apart, half out of the ordinary world. Number 165. And here is a genuinely strange one. After that great island was drowned, the world was changed so that it became round, and the blessed lands in the west were removed from the ordinary circle of the earth entirely. From then on, if a mortal sailed west, they would just loop around the round world and come home. Only the elves and a few specially permitted mortals could still take the old straight road, off the curve of the world, to reach the west. So the elves, in the end, are sailing along a path that mortals physically cannot follow anymore. That detail gives me chills every time. Number 166. The enemy's land, Mordor, is a clever bit of geography. It is ringed almost completely by mountains on three sides, a natural fortress, which is exactly why he chose it. You do not have to build many walls when the land itself walls you in. It is a dead, ashen, guarded place, and getting into it is half the entire problem of the main story. Number 167. That great gloomy forest we keep calling Mirkwood was not always dark. Once it was called Greenwood the Great, a pleasant enough wood, and it only became Mirkwood after a shadow crept into it and made it sickly and dangerous, spiders and all. Names in this world are like tree rings. If you learn the old name of a place, you usually learn a sad story about what happened to it. Number 168. Running down through the middle of the map is the Anduin, the great river, the main artery of that whole part of the world. So much of the story happens along it, and it feels like a character in its own right, carrying boats and bodies and history down toward the sea. If you ever get lost on the map, find the big river, and you can usually work out where you are. Number 169. Deep in the enemy's land stands the mountain of fire, Orodruin, the one we have been circling all night, the only forge in the whole world hot enough to unmake the ring. It is a volcano, and it is tied so closely to the enemy's own power that it flares up when he is strong and lies quiet when he is weak. The land itself keeps score of how the Dark Lord is doing. And number 170, a gentle place to finish this stretch. On the far western shore of Middle-earth are the Grey Havens, the quiet port from which the elves take ship into the west for the last time. It is where the very end of the great story happens. A small harbour, a white ship, a few friends on the shore watching it go. Of all the corners of this world, that little grey harbour is the one I find hardest to think about. But it is also, in its way, the most peaceful. A place for endings that are also, maybe, beginnings out of sight. Here is the image for this one. A broken sword, laid out on a cloth, its two pieces kept together for generations, even though it cannot cut a thing. People in this world keep broken things, if the things mean enough. So number 171. That broken sword is Narsil, the blade of the great king who fought the enemy in the last alliance long ago. It shattered beneath him, and the shards were kept, an heirloom of his heirs, all through the long centuries of waiting. And at last it is reforged into a new sword, Anduril, the flame of the west, carried by the returning king. A broken thing, mended right when it is finally needed. Very Tolkien, that. Number 172. We already met Sting, Bilbo's little blade that later passes to Frodo, glowing blue when orcs are near. The funny thing is, it is really an elvish knife that just happens to be sword-sized for a hobbit. One person's dagger is another's trusty sword. A nice quiet joke about scale that runs through the whole hobbit business. Number 173. Two other named blades turn up in Bilbo's adventure, pulled from a troll horde, Glamdring and Orcrist. Glamdring, the foe hammer, becomes Gandalf's sword and stays with him right through everything. Orcrist goes to Thorin, and both were made long ago in that hidden elven city, Gondolin. So these blades are older than most kingdoms. Good swords in this world tend to outlive several owners. Number 174. Right, Mithril, which I have been promising you all night. It is a metal, sometimes called true silver, mined by the dwarves in Moria. It is as light as a feather and as hard as dragon scale. It never tarnishes, and it can be worked into things of great beauty and strength at once. Simply the most precious substance in the world, and Moria was the only place it was ever found. Number 175, to show you just how precious. Bilbo comes home from his adventure with a small shirt of mithril mail, given to him almost as a trinket, and it is quietly worth more than the entire Shire, every field and hole and hobbit in it. That little vest is the single most valuable object for miles, and later it saves Frodo's life in Moria when a spear that should have killed him simply does not get through. The most expensive thing in the story turns out to be one of the most useful too. Number 176. Then there are the Palantiri, the seeing stones, dark crystal globes brought over from that drowned island long ago. There were several of them, and if you looked into one you could see far-off places and even speak to whoever held another. Brilliant in theory. The trouble is the enemy got hold of one, so anyone using another risked having their mind quietly bent. A magical video call system compromised by the worst possible person on the other end. Number 177. One of my favourite objects in the whole story is a small one. The Phial of Galadriel, a little glass vial given to Frodo, holding the captured light of that star we talked about. The mariner with the jewel on his brow, starlight in a bottle essentially, a piece of the oldest light in the world, small enough for a pocket that blazes up in the darkest places when there is nothing else left. A tiny bit of ancient hope you can carry with you. I think about that one a lot. Number 178. The hobbits also pick up little swords along the way from an old burial mound, the barrow blades, and there is a beautiful detail hidden in them. Those blades were forged long ago by the men of that lost northern kingdom, specifically for the war against the very Wraith King who menaces everyone later. So when one is finally used against him, it is a weapon made for that exact purpose, waiting patiently in a grave for centuries. The world has a long memory, and sometimes it pays off. Number 179. Back in Bilbo's story, there is the Arkenstone, the great jewel the dwarves called the Heart of the Mountain, the most beautiful gem in all their hoard. And it becomes the thing Thorin wants above all, more than fairness or friendship, to the point where his craving for it nearly wrecks everything. It is a smaller echo of the trouble the ring causes. A beautiful thing a good person wants too much. And number 180, a modest pair to round it off. There are heirloom horns in this world, and they matter. Boromir carries the great horn of Gondor, which he blows when in dire need, and its sound carries for miles, and Merry, at the very end, is given a little silver horn from the treasure of Rohan, which he blows when it is time to rouse the Shire and set things right at home. A horn is a simple thing, but in this world, blowing one is a way of saying, I am here, I have not given up, come and help. And people do come. That is a nice thing to believe as you're dropping off. Let us end the body of this in a warm kitchen, with the smell of fresh bread, because after all the wars and rings it is nice to remember that most of Middle-earth was, thankfully, just people getting on with dinner. The cosy details are my favourite, if I am honest, so indulge me. So number 181, the most famous food in the whole world is lembas, the elvish whey bread. It is pale, it keeps for months without going stale, and a single bite is enough to fill a grown traveller for a whole day of hard walking. The elves are a bit precious about it, and there is a running gag with Sam being far less reverent about his magic biscuits than they would like, but it genuinely keeps Frodo and Sam going across the worst of their journey. Never underestimate good travel snacks. Number 182. In Rivendell there is a cordial called Miravor, a warming drink kept for the road, which puts fresh heart back into you when you're cold and spent. Gandalf doles it out on the freezing mountainside. Every good haven seems to have its own restorative tipple, which feels about right. Hospitality in Middle-earth is a serious business. Number 183. Here is a fun one. When Merry and Pippin fall in with the Ents, they are given Ent draughts to drink, the water the Ents themselves live on, and it does something unexpected. It makes the two hobbits grow, physically taller than any hobbit had been in living memory. So they come home from the war, not just braver, but literally bigger, which nobody back in the Shire can quite account for. Magic tree water with a side effect of a growth spurt. Wonderful. Number 184. The Hobbit's proudest contribution to the world, they will tell you, is pipeweed, a herb for smoking that they cultivated and turned into a proper art, grown especially down in the southern part of the Shire. There is even a mock scholarly passage about its history, written completely straight-faced, treating the growing of it as one of Hobbitkind's great cultural achievements. Bless them, everyone needs a hobby to be smug about. Number 185. Two inns you will hear about often. In the Shire there is the Green Dragon, the cosy local where the hobbits drink and gossip, and out on the road the Prancing Pony, a bustling crossroads inn where strange folk pass through, and where the hobbits first meet a certain ranger lurking in the corner. A good inn in this world is where the plot tends to happen, and where the beer is. Number 186. There is a healing herb called Athelas or Kingsfoil, a plain-looking plant most people treat as a weed. But in the right hands, the hands of the true king, it has real power to soothe and heal, and drive back the darkness that clings to those the wraiths have touched. There is a lovely old saying that the hands of the king are the hands of a healer, and that is how the rightful king is known. Not by his sword, by whether he can make people well. Number 187. Now Hobbit customs, and this is a properly charming one. On a Hobbit's birthday, they do not receive presents. They give them away, handing out gifts to everyone else. Such a generous, backwards, lovely inversion of how we do it, and it tells you a great deal about the sort of people they were. Number 188. Connected to that is a word I adore, matham. A matham is any object a hobbit has no earthly use for, but cannot quite bring themselves to throw away, so it gets passed around as a present or stored up. They had so many of these that one town kept a whole museum of them, literally called the Matham House, a museum of useless things too good to bin. If that is not the most relatable institution in all of fantasy, I do not know what is. My whole loft is essentially a Matham House. Number 189. The hobbits kept their own calendar, the Shire reckoning, and it was pleasantly odd. They had special days that sat outside the ordinary weeks and months. Midsummer ones they called the Lithe, and midwinter ones tied to Yule, little pockets of holiday belonging to no weekday at all. A calendar clearly designed by people whose main priorities were knowing when the festivals were and when to plant things. Sensible, really. And number 190, the one that stitches the whole world together quietly. There are songs absolutely everywhere in these books. Walking songs the hobbits make up on the road, drinking songs in the inns, Ancient laments the elves sing for things lost long ago, and grand old lays about the heroes of the elder days. Tolkien filled his world with poetry, to the point where some readers skip the songs, and I understand why, but they are what make it feel like a real, lived-in culture, rather than a stage set. People who sing on the road are people who feel at home in their world. And that, more than the swords or the rings, is what I take away from the place. To finish, let us step out of the world for a bit and talk about the man who dreamed the whole thing up, because his story is nearly as good as any he wrote. And it begins, of all places, with a blank page, number 191. John Ronald Reuel Tolkien, born in 1892, gone in 1973, was for most of his working life an Oxford professor, an expert in very old languages and older poems. He was not, for the longest time, a famous novelist at all, just a quiet academic with an entire secret universe running in the back of his head. Number 192. And here is the famous beginning. He was marking exam papers one summer, a dull job he took on for extra money, when he turned over a page a student had left blank, and for no reason he could ever explain, wrote on it. In a hole in the ground there lived a hobbit. He did not know what a hobbit was yet. He just liked the sound of it. The whole thing grew out of that one idle line on a scrap of spare paper. Number 193. There is a darker route to it, though. As a young man, he fought in the First World War in the trenches of the Somme, and he lost nearly all of his closest school friends there. He rarely spoke about it head-on, but you can feel it all through his work. The ordinary decent people swept up in enormous horrors, the deep love of small comforts, the grief for a green world torn to pieces. He did not really write about the war, but he very much wrote out of it. Number 194. Back at Oxford, he fell in with a circle of writer friends who called themselves the Inklings, among them his great mate C.S. Lewis, who went on to write Narnia. They would gather in a pub, a real one you can still walk into today, and read their unfinished work aloud over a pint. So great chunks of Middle-earth were first heard out loud in a noisy bar by a handful of friends, giving their honest opinion. No grand writing retreat, just the pub. I find that genuinely lovely. Number 195. The big book took him something like 12 years on and off around his teaching and his life, and it was never meant to be 3 books. He wrote it as one enormous single story, and the publisher carved it into 3 volumes, largely because paper was expensive and scarce after the war. So the famous trilogy is a trilogy almost by accident, for reasons of paper and money more than art. Number 196. His first and most important audience was always his own children. For years he wrote them illustrated letters every Christmas, pretending to be Father Christmas, full of little disasters at the North Pole and a clumsy polar bear. The same man who dreamed up the ring wraiths spent his Decembers hand-drawing daft letters for his kids. Both are the same person, and I think that tells you just about everything worth knowing about him. Number 197. And now the promise I made you a while back, about that love story from the elder days. When Tolkien was young, before the war, he and the woman he loved, Edith, walked out into a wood, and she danced for him among the flowers. That memory became the seed of Beren and Luthien, the mortal man and the immortal woman who gives up forever for him. It meant so much to him that when Edith died, he had the name Luthien carved on her gravestone, and when he died not long after, they added Beren to his. They lie together under those 2 names to this day. The greatest love story in his invented world is underneath just the 2 of them. Number 198. He did not live to publish the deepest, oldest stories, the ones about the jewels and the trees and the elder days we wandered through earlier. That enormous task fell to his son, Christopher, who spent the rest of his own long life sorting and editing his father's mountains of notes into finished books. That great old history finally came out in 1977, 4 years after Tolkien died, entirely thanks to his son's patience. Number 199. And it did not stop there either. Christopher and the scholars after him kept at it for decades, and new books drawn from Tolkien's papers are still turning up. One gathering his late writings on the world appeared in 2021, and another, pulling together everything about that drowned island, came out in 2022. A man who died 50-odd years ago is, somehow, still quietly publishing. Not many writers manage that. And number 200, which is a nice spot to land on. His world did not stay on the page, of course. There were the big film trilogies most people know. More recently, an animated tale set among the horse lords of Rohan. And there is another still on its way. A story following Gollum, due out at the very end of 2027. Plus games and paintings, and more music written for this made-up place than for a lot of real countries. Not bad in the end for a quiet professor who scribbled one silly sentence on a blank exam paper because he liked the way it sounded. That one hobbit in that one hole turned into all of this. And here we still are, all these years later, happily wandering around inside it. And that is 200. We got there, gently in the end. I do like that we finished on the songs and the suppers rather than on a battle, because honestly, that is the part of Middle-earth I keep going back to. Not the wars, the sense that it is a real, old, lived-in place, with its own food and its own holidays and its own daft little museums of things nobody needs. A world you can wander around in your head, like I said right at the start, and feel oddly at home in. There is easily another whole video's worth of this stuff, where these came from, by the way. I have barely touched the wizard's quieter corners, or half the peoples off the edges of the map, or the truly deep old stories. So maybe another night, if you fancy it, we will go wandering again somewhere else in it. For now, though, I hope some of these little details are rattling around pleasantly in your head, and I hope you're somewhere warm and comfortable, and I hope, most of all, that you're already half asleep, and only catching about one word in 3 of this. That is the goal, after all. Take care of yourself, sleep well, and I will see you next time, somewhere back